Hello, this is Will Gormley introducing my new Hand of God Grip Medallion. 16 years after introducing the Hand of God Crucifix with chain loop, I re-engineered this classic into a handgun grip medallion. After all, most folks buying my crucifixes over the years have been modifying them for grips anyway. In fact, Cimarron's Holy Smoker used my Hand of God Crucifix as the basis for their grip medallion. And most recently, Pieta is gearing up for a run of movie-inspired sidearms. One of them is using my Hand of God Crucifix as the basis for their grip medallion. I should have done it years ago, but this will save anyone who wants to inlay their own grips with the iconic Hand of God Grip Medallion hours of labor. The contours engineered into the Hand of God Grip Medallion can't and don't match any specific weapon. The medallion is designed for the Colt Single Action Army model of 1873. But those grips are hand-fitted to the frames, and every grip is just a little bit different. However, conforming the medallion to generically fit the Colt Single Action Army right and left side grips results in a medallion generally conforming to many handgun grips. That being said, minor or major fitting of the medallion to specific grips will result in the best inlayment. There are three basic methods for customizing the Hand of God Grip Medallion to your specific weapon. The first is to gently bend the medallion by tiny increments to lay flush on your grips. I find a ball-peen hammer used on the back of the medallion, laying on heavy leather to protect the face of the medallion, works well for adding curve to the medallion. To reduce curve, gently work the face of the medallion with a poly mallet while the arms rest on a hard surface. Using a small anvil can help work out curves. This should be done before removing any grip material. Warning! Bending the medallion too aggressively may crack or break the medallion. Bending the medallion too extremely may crack or break the medallion. Bending the medallion without protecting the face from hard surfaces like hammer faces or the jaws of tools may mar the decorative face of the medallion. We don't care so much about the back. The second method is to file away the back of the medallion to lay flush on your grips. This should be done before removing any grip material. Warning: use of power tools may remove too much material too quickly. Power tools may get away from the user and mar medallion or flesh. Ow! Use of power tools may heat up medallion, which can burn flesh. Ow! Use of power tools is not recommended. Only use power tools at your own risk. There, I've done my legal bit. Try out for the Darwin Awards if you want, but don't blame me. The third method is to not alter the medallion at all and simply inlay medallion into the grips as is. My Hand of God Grip Medallion is designed thick. Seating the medallion deeper in the grip results in a more secure inlay. But this requires the removal of more grip material to inlay the medallion. At the same time, however, it compensates for different grip contours. One section of the medallion may have to be inlaid more deeply than another, but in most cases there won't be any gaps in fitment underneath the medallion because of the thickness of the medallion. If the grip contour is too abrupt for the thickness of the medallion to compensate, the medallion should be gently bent or material removed from the back of the medallion at the thickest part, as already shown. My Hand of God Grip Medallion is designed to be held in place with quality epoxy after grip material has been removed for the inlay. There are epoxy troughs built into the back of the medallion to aid in affixing the medallion to the grip. Regardless of the method used to contour medallion grips, The back of the medallion should be abraded to enhance adhesiveness of the medallion, epoxy, and grip material. This can be accomplished as easily as using a coarse, wet-dry sandpaper to scuff up the back of the medallion. With the general information addressed, I'll cover how I specifically inlay my Hand of God Grip Medallions. I begin by taping over the grip with low-tack masking tape. At the approximate center of the Colt 1873 single-action grip base, I measure up a ½ inch for proper placement. For other grips, place the medallion on the grip for visual placement. Then measure distance to be marked on the masking tape. For two-piece grips with escutcheon screws, medallion will have to be placed with the radiant center of the medallion covering the escutcheon. Carefully cut away masking tape over escutcheon to ensure proper placement of medallion centered over the escutcheon rather than by measurement. Next, mark tape at top of medallion. Then measure grips at the top and bottom of medallion marks to find and mark the center of the grips. Place medallion on grip and visually verify medallion is centered on grip. For a Colt 1873 single-action army, proper movie placement of medallion is at an angle in the grip as shown. While holding the medallion firmly in place, trace around medallion with fine point pencil or marker. Make sure medallion does not slip around while tracing. If you have difficulty keeping the medallion in place, a small amount of rubber cement can be used to hold the medallion in place. Don't use too much because you don't want to remove the masking tape when you remove the medallion. Also, don't count on the rubber cement alone to hold the medallion in place while tracing. With a sharp X-Acto blade, carefully cut through masking tape at the inside of the tracing line. Attempt shallow cuts so you don't mar the finish of the grips, just in case you're off. Cut to the inside of the line for the same reason. More grip material can be removed later if you start out inletting too small of an outline. But once you've made the outline too big, there are no good ways to fill in the gap. Err on the side of caution and start with a narrow outline. Place medallion within outline cut in the masking tape. This is the time to ensure a perfect fit. If any of the masking tape is cut too wide, tape over it with another piece of masking tape. The scary part is removing grip material. If you screw this up, you either have to live with it or get replacement grips. Work slow. Work careful. Don't get impatient. Be gentle. This is not a race against time. It's a race against mistakes. Avoid power tools if you can. If you remove too much wood too aggressively, the grain can split outside of your outline. Carefully cut in your medallion outline and remove shallow layers a little at a time. Bone or ivory can chip or split. Care must be taken at all times. Always remove grip material from the outline in. Periodically place the medallion over the inletting. Do not force the medallion down into the inletting if it is too tight. If you force the medallion down into the inletting and have to pry it out for more work or to epoxy it in, you may split out the edges, especially with wood grain. If you become impatient and do this, you may be able to glue the split out sections back in, but it's best not to force the medallion in before it's being epoxied. There is a slight angle to the medallion designed to make the fit tighter the further it's pressed into the inletting. The deeper the medallion is set, the more grip material will have to be removed. This is done intentionally to help reduce gaps in the grip material around the medallion. It also gives excess epoxy a space to fill before it's pushed out around the medallion. Depending on the grip contours, you may find the deeper you set the medallion, the tighter it gets at the end of the medallion arms. This may not happen with every grip, but it will happen with many. You may find you need to lengthen the inletting at the ends of the medallion arms the deeper you inlet the medallion. When you are satisfied with the depth and the fit of the inlay, epoxy wells can be drilled into the grip to allow excess epoxy a place to escape before it pushes up around the medallion when securing the grip. Depending on the shear strength of the epoxy, this may also help anchor the medallion in the grip. Special steps are required when inletting medallions into grips over escutcheons. Some escutcheons may be recessed deep enough the escutcheon doesn't need to be ground down to allow for inletting. Flush-fitting escutcheons must have the material removed. This should be done at the same time the grip material is being removed. Note: the grip screw will need to be shortened as well. If it's not, when the screw is tightened to secure the grips, the tip of the screw will extend beyond the escutcheon below the medallion. The tip of the screw will then push the medallion up out of the inletting in the grip. There is a fine balance between getting enough epoxy for optimum retention and too much so it's pushing out around the medallion as it's being pressed into the inletting. A tool like a toothpick can be used to move the epoxy around to all the areas it needs to be, as well as used to remove excess epoxy. A clamp with rubber jaws works well to press the medallion into the inletting against the resistance of the epoxy, and it holds it there. If your medallion is covering an escutcheon, the escutcheon screw should be screwed into place so the threads in the escutcheon don't fill up with epoxy. This needs to be done before the epoxy is applied. Once epoxy is cured, your Hand of God grips are ready for action. The new Hand of God Grip Medallions are $45 each. Shipping in the States is $12 for 1 to 10 medallions. Canada, Mexico, and overseas shipping is extra. Contact Will at willgormleymaker.com to check availability or place an order. Thank you for your interest in my gear.